All right, I am back here getting ready for the U.S. Open tennis tournament. This actually starting on Monday over at the Billie Jean National Tennis Center over in Flushing Meadows. Joining me once again to talk about the tennis is tennis writer Chris Oddo is back with us. Chris, how are you?
I'm doing great. Pleasure to be with you. How you doing?
Doing pretty good. My favorite major of the year. I feel like there's a lot of headlines going in this tournament. I feel like it's a different sort of feel than what we had last year. What are your big headlines going into this tournament?
Yeah, it certainly has a different feel. Serena being back is adds a lot of excitement. It being likely her last slam, and pretty much definitely her last slam. I mean, the legendary career of Serena Williams coming to a close in the United States on home soil, place where she won her first major. That's just incredible. You can put aside the fact that she hasn't been playing well, that she likely will not be at her peak for this tournament, and just hope that she can find a way to get some wins in the first week and get the crowd excited. You never know. She's played in North America for a couple of weeks now and has struggled to find her winning form. But you have to feel if she hits another tick up and has put in some hard yards in the last week or two. She added a coach, by the way, Renee Stubbs, just in the last couple of days. So she's clearly thinking, how can I solve some of the problems I'm having and get some W's? That's the biggest storyline, I have to think. And then, of course, is Novak Djokovic going to play? We think likely not, because he's unvaccinated and he's probably not going to be allowed into the country, but we won't know until we have the draw come out tomorrow. And otherwise, Rafael Nadal questing for his 23rd major title, his third of this year, against the competition, which is probably co-favorite Daniil Medvedev, and then the rest of the field that is young but certainly on the rise.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to start with the whole Wimbledon situation here. I mean, the Serena situation here, because that's the number one headline thing for everybody here. I mean, we find out, I think, a couple weeks ago, this is going to be your last tournament. Ticket prices skyrocket. Everybody wants to go see Serena come back here for the last time. She doesn't do well in Wimbledon. She goes out pretty early. She goes out early in Cincinnati to Raducanu, and I mean, it feels like the odds are stacked against her, like having like a storybook run here. But like, do you think there's any shot she can make the second week here?
It's a possibility, yeah. I mean, she hasn't had the greatest form in the last couple of matches. I think she's gone 1-3 since she returned to the singles court at Wimbledon, but she hasn't looked horrible in those matches. She's not what we call match tough. She's not really, winning the big points. She's not producing those serves that she needs at the right times. She hasn't been far off in all of her sets. Well, some of them have been pretty ugly, but like I mentioned, the fact that she added Renee Stubbs as her coach, what we've seen from her on the practice court already in New York is her working a little bit harder on court, playing a little more physical, willing to test herself, knowing that she's going to have to really just give 100% physicality. She's known for these practices where she just kind of stands in the center of her court and her coach feeds her balls, doesn't make her run a lot. Right now, she seems committed to her movement. That could help her. If she gets a nice draw where she doesn't face top competition early, I think she could win 3 matches, which is what it takes to make the second week. Beyond that, I'd say unlikely that she makes this, like, as you say, storybook run to a title. Hard to imagine, but you just never know with Serena. And until she's out, there's that hope that she can produce something magical, which is basically what she's done for the last 2+ decades.
Yeah, for sure. I'd love to see what happens to her there. Also, I want to take a look at the defending champ, Emma Raducanu. We mentioned earlier. She beats Serena in Cincinnati a couple of weeks ago. She had the storybook run last year where she came out of nowhere as an unseeded player to win the whole tournament here. Like, what do you think her chances are to repeat this year at the U.S. Open?
I think there are some positive signs for Emma in the last few weeks. Admittedly, she has struggled all season long to find that magical form, but we need to take into account she's still 19. This is just her sixth Grand Slam appearance this week at the U.S. Open. She is by no means a veteran. She happened to kind of get ahead of the power curve by winning that title last year. It was amazing. The odds of her repeating, I would say, are slim, but things are looking up. She's hired a new coach, Dmitry Tursunov, a Russian coach who's had some great success on tour with Arina Sabalenka and also with Annette Kontaveit, two top players. And she seems to be playing a little more aggressive and a little more confident. I think we can expect big things from her in New York. A title is unlikely. Would not be surprised if she plays well and makes it into the second week and becomes a big part of the week 2 storylines, let's say.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. I think obviously the biggest name I think most people are aware of outside of Serena is Naomi Osaka, who won here twice. Didn't do well last year. Kind of had a lost year this year. Like, what do you think we can expect out of her here these next 2 weeks?
Honestly, it's been surprising the last couple of months with Osaka, because we know her to be incredible on the hard court surface, and her struggles in the spring were sort of expected. She was on clay, she was at Wimbledon, and she's done really not much in her career on those two surfaces. And it's always kind of like, you hope for the best with Naomi. What you expect when she gets back to the hard courts in North America, that she's going to start playing like herself, because Mike, what we saw in Miami was very promising in early April. She made the final of the tournament there and was really looking to be in good form. She ran into a steamroller by the name of Iga Swiatek in the final and ended up being the runner-up in Miami. But I think most people thought that when she gets back on hard court this summer, she would be real strong, and it hasn't happened. She's going into the U.S. Open on a 3-match losing streak. She's unseeded. The most interesting part of the Osaka storyline is that she's unseeded and she can face any top player in the first round. So it could be a very interesting week and a wild ride for Osaka. It has not been a great year. She's had more injury struggles. I guess the best news for her is she seems to be happy. She seems to be enjoying the tennis. We know she's an incredible player. She's a certain Hall of Famer. She's already won 4 major titles. It wouldn't be a big surprise if she does well in New York. However, given her form on the hard courts, it has been surprising that she hasn't been able to lift her form in the last month or so. So there really are pretty low expectations for her at this point.
Yeah, absolutely here. And I think the other name of interest to American fans is Coco Gaff, who obviously had some big success this year. She got to the final at the French Open, ended up losing there. She did sprain her ankle at Cincinnati, playing in the final there, I believe. And right now, we don't know like how this injury is going to impact her in the tournament. Do you think we should be worried about how far she can go with this ankle issue?
I think we're going to find out tonight. There's the players are going to play for peace tonight in Louis Armstrong Stadium in New York, and she's on the list. And I think if she plays, obviously it won't be a serious competition, but if she makes the effort to get out there and looks fine, I think we can assume that everything's good with the ankle, and that her pullout at Cincinnati last week was mostly precautionary. Didn't look to be that serious of an injury. She's 18 years old. I think she's going to be fine in terms of her health. So I think what the challenge will be for Coco is just matching the type of performance she was able to put forth in Paris, where she was the runner-up at Roland Garros. It was a pretty, big breakout performance for her. She's always been a good player on the clay surface, and she showed it. I think that's going to help her confidence-wise in terms of facing the challenges of the Grand Slam play. I think we expect her to win the U.S. Open at some point. And she said it herself. She was featured in the ESPN cover story yesterday. She says, I know I'm going to hold that trophy one day. In other words, she's not overly nervous about what might happen this year. She's got full belief in herself that good things are going to happen. And I think as if she's healthy, like we talked about, I think she'll be a big factor in this tournament, because both the men's and women's singles draws are pretty wide open. Iga Swiatek has been the dominant player on the WTA Tour in 2022, but she hasn't been that dominant in the last 2 months. And I think that opens the door for really the rest of the field. There's a lot of talented young players, and it's really going to be difficult right now. Your guess is as good as mine who might end up winning this tournament. It could be Coco Gaff.
Yeah, who are some of these other top contenders that you see on the women's side that really sort of stand out to you?
I think still the odds maker favorite is Iga Swiatek. She's been the most dominant player on the tour. She's the first one to 50 wins. She has been great on hard courts. Back in the spring, she won back-to-back titles at Indian Wells and Miami, also a title before that in the Middle East at Doha. Yet this summer, she struggled a little bit. She's complained a little bit about the balls that they use in North America, that they're a little light and not to her liking. She hasn't put up great results. She's looked okay, hasn't won a title. There's a lot of other players in better form than her right now. That doesn't mean they're going to outperform her at the U.S. Open. Caroline Garcia just on Saturday won the title in Cincinnati. She's probably the hottest player on tour right now. Maybe a lot of casual fans haven't heard from her, but she's a former world number 4. She's won 26 of her last 30 matches. She'll go into this tournament as a player with high expectations. If you look inside the top 5, there's Ons Jabeur from Tunisia, who's been in incredible form basically across the whole season. She's a big match player. She did some damage at Wimbledon. There's also Simona Halep, who won the title in Toronto, is showing some really great form. She's one of the players in the top 10 that could probably do some damage. And then, as you mentioned, we've got Naomi Osaka unseeded. Bianca Andreescu, the 2019 champion, unseeded. Emma Raducanu's in this draw. Victoria Azarenka, former champion. A lot of big names, a lot of players who could find themselves in the mix in the second week. And I think it's going to be like a lot of women's singles draws at the Grand Slam. It's going to be fairly unpredictable unless we see Iga Swiatek kind of rediscover that dominant form. And we'll know more about that in week one, I would say.
Yeah, for sure. I'll go to the men's side for a bit now because obviously for the men's side for a decade, I feel like it's always been like, which of the big three is winning it this year? Is it Roger, Rafa, or Novak? And this year, I mean, two of them are not there. Who knows about Rafa? This is the most wide open U.S. Open field it's been in years.
Yeah, I'd say yes and no. I'd say yes, it's wide open because of the wild card, because it's likely that Novak Djokovic won't be able to be allowed in the country and be able to play, which is a whole other topic we can get to on a separate podcast probably, but it's a shame. And he's a 21-time major champion. So when you take that kind of that type of player out of a draw, obviously it opens up a lot more. That said, if he does play, he'd have no prior matches coming into this tournament. We don't know what type of form he'd be in, but yes, it's wide open in that sense. It's also wide open in the sense that Rafael Nadal, who's probably the number one favorite and has had the best season on tour, winning 2 Grand Slam titles and 35-4 on the season with 4 titles, still has an abdominal issue. We don't know if he's in perfect shape yet. If that becomes a problem and that takes Nadal out of the tournament, then you're looking at Daniil Medvedev, last year's champion, and really an incredible player and destined potentially, I think, to win, multiple more U.S. Open titles. He's the favorite. So you still have those 2 names that are kind of anchoring the draw, Nadal and Medvedev, if Djokovic doesn't play. And let's keep in mind, the big 3 have won all 3 of the slams this year, despite it being 35 and older. Nadal has won 2 and Djokovic won the Wimbledon title. So I still think we have this theme of the big 3. I don't know how, because they're so old. You would have never predicted it 5 years ago. They're still winning all the slam titles. And if they don't, we still have Medvedev. But I will say you are correct in a sense. It does feel a little bit more wide open, like some other players could come into the mix, do some damage. There are some Carlos Alcaraz, the 19-year-old, who's just been such a revelation on tour over the last year and a half. There's Nick Kyrgios, the Wimbledon finalist, who's going to be a hot topic during the week. He's always exciting and always controversial. There's some other players that potentially have a shot at this title. I still think it's basically, for me right now, I see Nadal, if he's healthy, and Medvedev are really the top 2 favorites by a pretty long shot.
Yeah, I just think it's interesting considering the weirdness of the COVID situation we had the last couple of years. And right now, you basically have 3 different players coming into this tournament defensively defending their own titles, with Nadal from 19, Dominic Thiem in the COVID year, and Medvedev last year. I feel like that's very unusual.
I think that's so strange. It's so funny. Dominic Thiem is basically a shell of himself at the moment. He's coming back off wrist and hand injuries, and he's really hasn't found his form yet on tour. So I could say that he does not have a realistic shot of doing much about his title defense. And let's not forget, he won it in that crazy year in 2020 when there were 0 fans on site. It was such a strange U.S. Open, an unforgettable and strange U.S. Open that hopefully we'll never have to experience again. But yeah, it's one of those weird situations. It's going to be the first thing you probably hear on the ESPN broadcast, and you're going to hear it all the way through. That 3 players are in this draw that have won the title on their last appearance. I don't think that's ever happened before.
Yeah, I definitely don't. And one guy who's not won a title here, is not going to be here this year, is obviously Roger Federer, who's working his way back from a knee injury, especially coming back after this tournament over at the Laver Cup over in Europe here. And he's kind of hinted that next year might be his last year. Talking about doing one last Wimbledon. Do you think we get him back here one last time before he retires? Do you think is the chance we don't see Roger back in New York ever again?
I don't know. Roger's the type of guy that really values relationships and really has a sense of appreciation for his legions of fans and how much they adore him. And I think he realizes that the New York fan is a different fan than the Wimbledon fan, maybe. I think Wimbledon is going to be his primary target in terms of events on tour next year. I think that's pretty clear. We all know that's the place where his legacy has been built and where he probably really wants to be back and make one last appearance. The rest will be up to what Roger has left in the tank and what kind of tennis he thinks he can play. We know he's back on the practice courts. We know he's going to make some appearances later this season at the Laver Cup, which is coming up after the U.S. Open, and then at his hometown tournament in Basel. If he plays well there and likes how he feels physically, likes what he's capable of doing at his age, then I think he might want to push it on tour and maybe make plans to play at a couple of Grand Slams. Will he play all 4 of them? hard to say. And then I think it's going to depend if he does play Wimbledon. If he feels like he put in a good show, like it was worth it, then he'll play the U.S. Open as well, maybe to say goodbye there. And I also think one of his priorities will be Laver Cup, this event that he's heavily invested in with his agency called Teammate. They have a huge financial investment in it. It's very important to him, and I think it might be something where he wants to play his last tennis there just to help elevate the legacy of the Laver Cup. That's after the U.S. Open, so maybe he does play it. I'd say right now, if I had to bet on it, I'd say there's a 30% chance he does it. I hope he does, though. I hope he plays all the slams last year, and I hope he does well at them. But I guess it really depends on. We have to watch him closely this fall and see if he's in good form and if he's healthy enough to be competitive. He's not going to want to go out there if he can't compete with guys ranked outside the top 50 type of thing.
Yeah, that makes some sense here. Let's talk about Rafael Nadal here. Obviously, he's one of the big three who right now we think is going to be here, and obviously he was on a pace where he could have potentially an alternate universe been entering here, going for the calendar year Grand Slam, but he suffers the injury at Wimbledon, has to withdraw. Hasn't played much since. Like, what kind of form do you think Nadal could be in here?
That's a good question. We saw him briefly in Cincinnati, upset by Borna Coric in his first match, and everybody was thinking like, well, that's strange. Coric ranked 152. And then lo and behold, 5 days later, we realized just how well Coric was playing. He took the title in Cincinnati, and it doesn't look like a bad loss at all in retrospect for Nadal. I think it might have been a positive and one of those blessings in disguises because he's coming back from an abdominal issue, and admittedly, he wasn't really completely 100% clear of it. And I think he's still a little in the back of his mind worried in Cincinnati that, hey, I don't want to re-injure this and screw up my U.S. Open. And if he had won that match and won successive matches at Cincinnati, maybe played 4 days in a row, the chances of him re-injuring it, I would say, are pretty high. In this case, he gets to lose the match, go back to the practice court, get in a controlled environment, keep working on his game, keep getting fitter. The guy knows exactly what he needs to do at the U.S. Open. He doesn't need a lot of matches at this phase of his career. What he does need is a perfectly healthy abdominal. And it looks like, I'm guessing that it's going to be healthier now by not playing those matches. So I think he's in good shape. As long as he's been able to clear that injury and he can play 100% and keep it up match after match, he's my favorite at this tournament.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the defending champ, too, the actual current defending champion, Medvedev, where, I mean, he has the big upset last year. He stops Novak's run for the calendar year Grand Slam. And then this year's been weird for him because obviously he has the run in Australia and loses. He gets banned from Wimbledon because of the Russian situation with Ukraine, which, again, a lot of the tennis community was not a big fan of Wimbledon's decision there. Now he comes here, and I feel like I haven't heard much about him lately. What do you think his chances are here right now?
Well, he certainly looked better in the last couple of weeks. This is Daniil Medvedev's time of year. He really excels on the fast-playing hard courts in North America. He's won multiple titles here as a U.S. Open finalist in 2019. That was a big breakout for him, and I think it was a crazy tournament where he was the arch villain for a while, and then by the end of Sunday's final, where he pushed Rafael Nadal to 5 sets, the crowd in New York really just loved this guy. They have ever since. So there's a certain magic with Medvedev in the Open. He looked pretty good in Cincinnati, losing to Stefanos Tsitsipas, the Greek, in the semifinals. It was a bit of a weird match. He looks like he's very close or at his top form. I expect him to be in great form at the U.S. Open, where he always pretty much is consistently done very well. So I think he's in good shape. I think as you get older, you don't need to come into these tournaments with titles to have confidence. He knows New York is a place he knows where he can do well, and I think he is going to do well here. I mean, it's just a matter of really. Honestly, it's hard to imagine him not making the final for me based on what he's done in the past and what I saw from him in Cincinnati. I think he's in pretty good shape.
Yeah, I also feel like with the U.S. Open, it's also one of those times that all the tennis fans in this country are saying, where's the next great American man? We haven't had a great American man in years. And in terms of the American men in this draw, is there somebody here who you think could make a deep run here that would catch the interest of the casual fans in this country?
Absolutely. Well, let me just go back to Medvedev. 20-4 lifetime at the U.S. Open. Not a bad record.
Yeah.
The guy is good in Queens. It's his borough, obviously,
yep.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah, with the Americans, Taylor Fritz has been awesome this year. He's been a leader for a group of American men that are pretty deep. A lot of talented guys, 24 and under. There's Sebastian Korda, Francis Tiafoe, Riley Opelka, a lot of young players, Brandon Nakashima. I could go on. There's a lot of young American players that are pushing upwards towards the top of the game. Tommy Paul is another one. But Fritz has been, without a doubt, the leader of this group. He won the title in Indian Wells, defeating Nadal in the final. It was really an amazing performance where most people thought he was not even going to be able to play the final because he had such a bad ankle injury while warming up. He left the court and then he went off the court, got a couple injections, came back and was able to take out Nadal, who was also injured, but huge title. He's been solid all year, and I expect him to put in potentially a breakout performance for him in New York. He's the guy that could make a run maybe to the semis. Do I see him taking the title? It's hard to envision that, but I think there's a chance. And I think there's a lot of the U.S. names on the men's side that I mentioned, the Sebastian Kordas, the Tiafos. I think these guys all have a trip to the second week in them. Some of them could potentially push for quarters and semis. It doesn't feel like the time is right for them to be winning this title yet. Of course, it's been a long time since Andy Roddick was the last American man to win this title in 2003. I don't think that time is here yet, however, but I do think Taylor Fritz leading this group, they're building in the right direction. A couple of years down the road, maybe with no more Nadal, no more Djokovic, the chances will be a lot higher of them actually breaking through and winning a U.S. Open title.
Yeah, that's for sure here. And I always have fun with this tournament because I always like to look and see who's a sleeper so I make a deep run. I remember the first year Osaka won the title, she was a very popular sleeper pick and ended up winning the whole thing. Do you have any sleepers you're watching here on either side to make a deep push at this tournament?
I think Nick Kyrgios intrigues me. I don't know if he'd go in the sleeper category, but this is a guy who 4 months ago nobody thought would ever get into even a semifinal of a Grand Slam, not because of his talent, but because of his professionalism. He didn't take the game seriously enough, and he's really turned a quarter in terms of how he conducts himself on court, how he trains, how he works now. Now he's no longer just a wildly talented, undisciplined player. He's a guy who works hard, that knows what he wants, that believes he can compete at the top level. I think having him make a run of the semis or beyond would be a little bit surprising because he's just done it at Wimbledon. Nobody expected it. To have him back that up and do it again would be surprising, and also would be great for the tournament because the guy just, he's just pure box office. Women's side, former champion Bianca Andreescu is unseeded. I don't think a lot of people are counting her in as one of the players who might have a shot at the title. But as we said at the onset of the show, it's pretty wide open. She has that type of talent to break out again and surprise us again. She might be a good sleeper pick. Otherwise, it's sort of hard to predict someone like, who could have predicted Emma Raducanu last year? She's playing her second Grand Slam, just absolutely nuts. I think we saw Osaka come in 2018, but not quite like we did. I guess I'll go with Andreescu maybe and Kyrgios. Those may be some sleeper picks.
Yeah, for sure. And I do think it's also a challenge, this one, because we're recording prior to the release of the draw. I feel like having the draw, I think, is a big help in determining who can really be a win threat here, because obviously it depends who ends on whose quarters, who plays the back-to-back fourth round quarterfinal, stuff like that. I feel like it's much more difficult to try and project the winner at this point. But we had to sort of give me some odds on who are your top contenders you feel for the win on either side.
Well, I flip a coin for the men between Rafa and Medvedev. I say right now, if you always got to play it safe if you're a betting person with the way the big three have dominated the slams in the last 10 plus years. So I'll go with Nadal if he's perfectly healthy, if not Medvedev. Women's side, I thought about this last night, Mike, because I knew you were going to ask me, and it was hard. It was really hard. I came up with Simona Halep. I don't know. She's been in good form. I don't think it's Iga Swiatek's tournament to win based on her last couple of months of play. And I just think Simona Halep has the experience, and feel like there's one more slam in this player. Two-time Grand Slams champion, never won it in New York, but is great on the hard courts. I feel like it could be her time. But again, it's tough to pick.
Yeah, it is very tough to pick. It'll be fast to see how this tournament plays out in the next 2 weeks. Chris, thanks a lot of time. I really appreciate it. Before I let you go, how can people follow social media and keep up with some of your tennis coverage?
Oh, yeah. Check me out at @thefanchild. I'll be there all week, keeping it busy, writing for tennisnow.com and usopen.org.
Absolutely, Chris. Thanks for all the time. Really appreciate it.
Cheers, Mike. Take care.